Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Responsibility Quotient podcast. My name is Catherine Kowalczyk, and today is July the 4th, 2024. And today I have as my guest Eva Chipiuk. And if you don't know who she is, Eva is a outstanding and brave advocate for freedoms and the rights of Canadians. She is a lawyer in Alberta. She has a Bachelor of Science degree, as well as a law degree and a master's degree in alternative dispute resolution. For some of you, you will know that Eva, I guess, became notorious in her questioning of the Prime Minister of Canada when the emergency commission was being held in Ottawa as a result of the use of the Emergencies Act by the federal government in response to the trucker convoy. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Eva on a number of occasions and shared the stage with her last year at an event that we were hosting for a political party I used to be a part of. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Eva to the program tonight. Hi, Eva.
Hi, well, thanks for having me, Catherine.
Thanks for joining me. I've been following you for quite some time, I guess most notably during your time in Ottawa, and followed you with respect to your involvement with the trucker convoy, the Freedom Convoy. And I thought your performance in questioning the Prime Minister of Canada was outstanding. And since then, you've been quite active with respect to your advocacy and in fact have created a program called Empowered Canadians, where I understand that you have made it your mission to educate Canadians about their civic responsibilities, which is, I think, desperately needed in these times because, as I'm sure you will agree with me, we're in kind of uncharted territory with respect to where we're going as a society, the level of understanding that Canadians have with respect to not only what the word democracy might mean, but what it is they are supposed to do as responsible citizens in participating with their democracy. And I think that's an amazing program, and I'd like to hear you talk more about that. I'm also really interested in your lawsuits that you have initiated with Jeff Rath, and I think you have another one as well with Keith Wilson that you're working on, but I could be wrong about that. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't know where you would like to start, but please maybe tell us a little bit about your background. What I didn't mention in the intro is that you took a hiatus from law for a little bit, and I'm curious to hear from you how that has informed your practice after you've re-entered law after your little hiatus. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks. And I was just taking some notes because I'm happy to talk about all those things. But when you said after the cross-examination, I was quite active. And to be frank, I actually wasn't at first, because I think, like many of us, and this is why I want to bring it up, is I was just like, somebody else I'm sure is going to be doing this. I'm sure somebody else with a bigger platform and more knowledge is going to do this, or like people are going to get organized and they'll start talking. And it just didn't happen. Especially there was, I don't know if you really remember, was the whole issue with when the report was going to be released, and it was informed via, I think, like the order in council that enacted the Emergencies Commission said that the federal government, or at least the cabinet, would get it earlier than the rest of the public.
Yeah, I remember that. And what's behind that? I mean, that's I mean, in an era where the level of trust of our governments is, I think, at an all-time low, that seemed quite fishy to me.
Yeah, but that was it. And it was, and this is where sometimes, like, we've had a few discussions, and I think that is also on us. We didn't realize that until later, and it was available to all Canadians to see that that was part of the order, that the cabinet would receive it earlier, but nobody called them on it. So I turned it into a bit of a public awareness campaign, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have any public relations background. I'm not a communications expert by any way, shape, or form, but I knew this was important, and I knew Canadians would be interested in this. And I wasn't even very active on Twitter at the time, but I figured it out. I got it out. I got the message out, and then we were able they actually reversed course on it, and they said that it wouldn't be released to anybody before it was released to everybody. So that's where I'm saying as well, and this is why I make it my mission to do what I'm doing, is there's so much power available to us if we know how to use it. And I think that'll, even myself included, I was waiting for somebody else to do it, or somebody else to take this on, or with a bigger platform to talk about it. And then I'm like, no, I guess I'm just going to have to do it myself.
Yeah, you're just breaking up a little bit, so I'm not too sure if it's my internet connection or yours, but in any event, yeah, it's one of those things. I kind of can relate to that because for the longest time when the beginning of COVID happened, my husband and I did my first petition on whatever, I forget, whatever the petition, there's a petition site out there. And I did my first petition where I was like demanding for Parliament to hold a debate, and is there a pandemic and all this crap, right? Like thinking, this can't be happening. I can't believe that we're just going along with this without any sort of conversation about what's happening, especially in Ottawa. And then we would walk around the city of Calgary because we had heard that there were some rallies going on. And at first, the rallies, we went to the rally center, and there was a handful of us. So, it was super disappointing that I didn't see more people engaged in what was happening. But also, I was very curious about where the lawyers were, and so I did end up meeting Doris Reimer at a rally that she was speaking at. And in fact, she ended up getting a ticket for not being masked and being in a crowd of whatever the threshold was. And but after that, that's how we formed Lawyers for Truth. And it was really a breath of fresh air to find another lawyer in the province who was as passionate about what was going on as I was. And then obviously to see other people like yourself, especially in our profession, take the lead and fighting for our rights and freedoms. So it's, it is up to us as individuals to take that personal responsibility. And I would love to share that responsibility. I have no desire to have a monopoly on any of that. And I think that, which is part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now, and have done what I have done in the past in trying to educate myself and participate in the democratic process, running in the last provincial election, and trying to seek out a political solution, and realizing how absolutely challenging that is. It's absolutely challenging and disheartening as well. But nonetheless, we soldier on, right? We put one foot in front of the other, and we do what we can. And I firmly believe that over time, people will learn that there's not going to be one particular person or leader or politician that's going to fix this problem that we find ourselves in, but it's going to be up to us as individuals to live the solution.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, what is the problem? Because some people don't see there's a problem. So I think that's also an issue that we are facing generally. And so that's a democracy. I think we want to kind of we have to recognize that other people don't agree, and so we
Yeah.
can't just say that uh, we need to make it happen because that's what we need and we want, because other people don't agree with us. So it's just making our voices heard, I think, is what I'm trying to get at too. And how does that happen? How do we advocate for the things we want to elevate?
Right, right. So I think part of the problem is that there's a fundamental lack of understanding about how our processes work, how our democracy works, and who are the people in positions of power, both seen and unseen, that are the decision makers. And I don't think that there's been a full transparency around those issues. And instead, I think by and large Canadians have been, grown up, we've grown up in a being lulled in the sense of security, and that somebody else is going to take care of the problems for us. And we've had a very good life here in Canada, I think, by and large. And so, but we haven't been fully informed, one, about our history, and then two, about how things are actually decided, and who is actually deciding um, big things that are impacting all of us. And so I think what you're doing as part of Empowered Canadians is ex- re-educating people about, the different levels of our constitution, or in our constitutional powers, and the legislative, executive, and the judicial, and also partly as well encouraging people to take a vested interest in that, and learn more about the actual reality about these systems and institutions, because I don't think we've done a great job in our education system to provide people with the actual truth around what's going on.
So I'm going to challenge you here a little bit, because this is where feel there's always a chicken and an egg situation. Is it our responsibility, or are we looking for somebody to give us that information? And I think you answered my question earlier too, is what is it that we want? And you said we need to know more about who's in charge and what they're in charge of, seen and unseen. But have we even asked those questions? Have we demanded that of our government? Has that been an issue that we've made our voices heard loud enough? And I would put to you that we haven't done that. Like, and that's where I continuously keep repeating myself, is
Yeah.
there's so much power available to us, but we're just really ineffective in using it, is how I see it. Like, I think that's an excellent thing that I think a lot of regular Canadians would get behind. But you're maybe the first person that kind of said that to me, I think, in the last 2-3 years, about seeing who is making the decisions and how that's happening. And why wouldn't everybody want to have a bit more? It's the people up at the top echelons that probably don't want all of that information out. But if most regular Canadians would be like, yeah, that seems like a pretty fair and reasonable request, why wouldn't our elected officials get on board with that? But it just hasn't been asked. And on the education system, have we demanded it? I don't have kids. Are parents asking that there's more civics in their education system? Has that come up? Is there a petition around that? Why not, if it's not?
Well, and I think that goes back to probably how we've grown up in such a comfortable environment, by and
Yeah.
large. And certainly when, and not only comfortable, but also we've been busied, right? Our focus has always been, from my, and this is just my opinion, but our
Mhm.
focus has been shifted very strategically away from from these sorts of topics, it starts with the notion that you're not allowed to talk about politics, you're not allowed to talk about religion. Those are things that we don't talk about around the dinner table or in good company. And so when we have that mindset, it really puts a chill on those conversations and makes them almost taboo. So from my perspective, having these conversations, even though they're really challenging, and I know you and I don't agree on everything either. And so, it's not like you're, just because you're an advocate for the rights and freedoms of individuals doesn't mean that we agree on absolutely everything or the path forward. And we all bring our distinct, I guess, talents or strengths to the negotiating table. And so that's what I think is necessary and needed as well, in terms of being able to get this message out to as many people as possible, because the way I relay a message resonates with people, but it doesn't with other people, but yours might. And we could be saying the same thing or similar things, but our approach to it might be different, which is, I think, beautiful. And that's the diversity that we're looking for. And in my opinion, in order to move it forward. And so, but what I see is what I've seen in the last 4 years is a general malaise and disinterest in what's happening, and a blanket acceptance that just because somebody's been elected, that they are almost raised to a star status platform, where there's high expectations from certain people, especially on the other side, but also on the side that would be supportive of that person. But we have this starstruck notion that, and put these people on a pedestal, that just because they've been elected, that they have some sort of superpower or are better educated, and in fact is often the case that they actually don't have the qualifications to do the job that they've been put in charge to do. Like, look at, for instance, Chrystia Freeland, who's a journalist, who is the deputy prime minister and minister of finance. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that would necessarily qualify her, being a journalist, to be in that portfolio. I mean,
yeah, well, like, we could go around in circles, about that, and I don't disagree, obviously, but I actually just heard a clip about Donald Trump, and how he is seen. It was Jordan Peterson talking about the one time he met him, and he said he's the way that people react to him, he's at such a star level right now, because he was already a celebrity in his own right, and then he became this personality that is now next to none. He said it's probably like what JFK was decades ago. So, like, I completely agree with you on all of it, but for me, it's always like, and what are we going to do about it? And that's where I'm always trying to move forward. Yeah, Chrystia Freeland should never be in that position. Especially now, we see how terrible, like, if she had good people around her, that would be a different story. Somebody with that, same with Trump. He probably didn't have the qualifications for foreign affairs, but he had the right people around him to get the right things done. And then his foreign affairs portfolio in his 4 years was actually so stellar compared to other ones that seem to have all this foreign affairs experience. So, and one thing I do want to say, and I very much agree with you, is nobody we should be looking at as a hero. I don't look at anybody as a hero. Sometimes people think that, import that on me, that Pierre is my hero or somebody is my hero. I've never used those words. I'll never say those words. And the reason is I don't want my heroes to be disappointing me. I want to be the writer of my own life. And if I think something needs to be done, it needs to be done. And that's taking personal responsibility. And especially on this side of the political spectrum, and crazy that people keep calling me conservative all the time, because I don't even know if that's would be an appropriate label for me. I don't think in Canada, especially, what was conservative a few years ago even is traditionally conservative. Liberal is, it's everything's become so extreme. Everything is upside down. But I think that we really have to look at what we believe in and advocate for ourselves. Sorry, I wanted to say, with the conservative side, or the more libertarian side, because it's hard to, classic liberal would be the word to use. You wouldn't have so much government intervention. So when we become victims all the time, that's the part that I don't like. On when it's like, well, why didn't they do this, and why isn't there more education in the schools, or all these questions? It's like, well, if there's a problem, let's find a solution to deal with it. Let's take personal responsibility of it. And so that's where I find there's always a disconnect on this side, because on the left side right now, it's very socialist, and they are very good at helping each other out. They're very good at saying, this is our message. We're all going to go with this message, and we're going to work together to achieve our goals. And on this other side, it's like, there's so many problems. There's chickens with their heads cut off. And I'm like, what is going on? Can somebody, take charge here? Let's elevate the conversation. And that's where I have a hard time. That's where I see a lot of going in circles. And I'm not good at that. If I see a problem, I'm like, let's get active. I'm not good at just talking about problems. I've been at a few board meetings and administrative stuff. When I was younger, I was on a city council next gen group, and all we did was talk. And I'm like, why are we sitting here every month talking? Let's actually do something. There's a lot of interest. Let's do something fun. Let's do something innovative. And some people like to do the talking part.
Hey, I couldn't agree more with you. I've been to so many meetings of people whose hearts are in the right place, but we can't, you hit it right on the nail, right on the head. We can't seem to get organized, sadly. And I'm hoping that is going to change, and maybe it does change as things progressively continue to deteriorate. And I'm hopeful that it doesn't have to, we don't have to hit that rock bottom. But living in the solution, as a recovered alcoholic, in part of a 12-step program, that is one of the big mantras of living in the solution. And that's also a big part of taking personal responsibility. And so it's one thing to identify the problem, but then you identify the problem, and then it's about living in the solution and finding a way to fix it or overcome it, make it better, whatever the challenge is. So while you're working on some big lawsuits that you and as well as Jeff Rath have launched, can you describe them for me and let me know what stage they're at, and for our viewers as well?
Yes. So I'll start with the Ingram lawsuit. So I'm sure you're familiar with it, but I'll just give a bit of a background. There was a decision called Ingram that came out in Alberta. I think it was last summer. And the Ingram decision was the Ingram case was started on behalf of a gym owner in Calgary, that her businesses were shut down because of the COVID mandates, lockdown, vaccine passports, all that stuff. And that was challenged in court. There was a decision that came out last year called the Ingram decision, and the judge found that all of the orders that were in question at the time were deemed to be illegal, basically. So ultra vires, that means without authority, without proper authority. And so they were all deemed to be illegal. And the reason it was found to be illegal, because under the Public Health Act, only one person in the province had the authority to issue those public health orders, and that was Dina Hinshaw, the public health officer at the time. And through evidence in that case, it was found, she gave evidence saying that she gave Jason Kenney, the premier, a list of options and he picked one. And so he made the decision under the Public Health Act. That wasn't what was allowed by the law. And so the judge found that that was ultra vires, his authority, and all of those decisions were illegal. I think this is a massive win. There's been a lot of controversy about that, and I'm happy to chat about that. But going back to our earlier discussion, elected officials and people in power only have the power that the law that has been given to them, that they've written, gives them. If they overstep that, I think that's massive. I think that is huge. And you don't have that opportunity to call them out in that way very often. And in my view, it's not a technicality. I've heard so many people say that, but it was an outright improper use of power. And they only have the power that they have. Otherwise, they're just another citizen. They only have what's written. And it's very important. And so that's the case. And because that case was found that all of those orders were illegal, Jeff Rath had started shortly thereafter a lawsuit on behalf of all businesses in Alberta that suffered losses as a result of those now deemed illegal orders. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about the Ingram decision for a sec before we talk about the class action a bit. But your thoughts? I think it's such a massive win, and so many people have gone back and forth about it on whether or not it's a big win or just a technicality.
Well, I think it is a win in some respects. When I read the judgment, because the judge went on to give her opinion about the charter and did the charter analysis, which I thought was not necessary. Having, and because it's usually in those, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't do charter litigation, obviously, but it's really, it wouldn't have been that uncommon for that judge to not opine, give a charter opinion, right? She could have easily has said it was ultra vires, the government shouldn't, these orders were illegal, and then left it at that. But she went on to give her charter analysis, so I don't know. I'd like your opinion on that. But I do think it was good that, and I do think it was a win. But I think how the rest of the decision was laid out really took the wind out of that sail, out of the victory, because of the message that it left.
So I don't see it that way at all, because to me, and in fact, in law, it is worthless, really. The decision already is that it's ultra vires. So all of that other discussion about whether or not it was constitution was just orbiter extra. And in law, it's like, okay, thank you for providing your opinion on that point. But the fact is you've said it's illegal. So it's a win. And I think, it's two different rooms. So I don't think they're connected at all in that way, because it's already illegal. It doesn't take anything away, in my view. I think it's unfortunate that she had to talk about it, because it's already a very controversial thing, all of that, what's happened during COVID. And I'm not looking to defend judges in any way, shape, or form, because, they've taken on the job. They should be in a place to defend themselves and their actions. But a lot of what has happened, like you go before judges, like you do family law, hey? Mm-hmm. So you probably see judges more often than I do even. But how many people are equipped to understand epidemiology and immunology? I used to do a lot of regulatory work. So it was very scientific, lots of engineering stuff, accounting, mathematics, all this stuff. And there's a very specialized board for that. So usually there's one lawyer, one engineer, and they have their own legal counsel. Here you're people were giving judges like these thick, like epidemiological reports, and they're like, here, read it. Now make a decision on whether the public health officer made the right decision or not, or whether or not they breached our charter rights. I'm not defending them. I think we need to understand what happened and learn from it. If we're ever in this kind of crazy crisis again, is it appropriate to have this go in front of a judge? Or maybe we should have some kind of public health forum that would actually discuss it. And actually, like, I'm just making this up as we're talking, but actually maybe that's the best idea, because it would give them the opportunity of these experts that never had a chance yet to debate each other. So like, if you had a forum like that, you could actually have the two experts talking about their expert evidence, have that more visible, and then have somebody make a decision in the end. I don't know. And I do understand that already the Alberta government has made some changes to the Public Health Act, because obviously I'm not saying that Dina Hinshaw should have had all of that power. I totally understand. An unelected bureaucrat shouldn't have that much power to lock everybody up in Alberta. And they've already made that change. And I think more should happen. But we need to still talk about that. We need to advocate for that. We need to petition and write to our elected officials to make that happen. Because this is what I'm saying, is we're like, oh, that was too bad. Well, if there's an issue, we've now lived through it. So let's revisit it and let's learn from it and find some different solutions and avenues that would be more appropriate in the future.
Well, it's amazing to me. I agree with you. And, the fact that there have been changes to the Public Health Act, Danielle Smith has basically said, I think now the situation is that only cabinet can make these decisions. The politicians are going to take responsibility for this, which I happen to agree with. I think that's the way it should have been, but not just one person. And you hope that, the next go around, that the emergency preparedness plan that had been in place and not followed will be resurrected and made better, and ensure that there's more than just one element of society considered in making these decisions. So, I don't think that there was, and I think the emergency preparedness plan that was in place, as described by Colonel Redmond, he was saying that, you have to take a multifaceted approach in examining how these decisions are going to impact, socioeconomic, you have education, health. It's not just, we're going to stop the spread, or what, whatever the rationale was that they used in the pandemic. But I think what was disappointing for me, and although I agree with your wholeheartedly, I've been calling for an independent public inquiry and still believe that that's necessary today to have a full understanding about how things happened. I don't think the Manning report was robust enough, and I think that there are issues that we need to drill down further into. But when I was running in the past provincial election in Old Didsbury Three Hills and doing my door knocking, it was astounding to me that COVID wasn't on the ballot. That nobody wanted to talk about COVID. And it essentially, the silence from Albertans in that election was overwhelmingly disappointing, because we had just come through 3 years of absolute hell. And
that's where, again, I'm gonna challenge you, because you had that opportunity to talk to Albertans, and you're saying that they weren't interested in this topic. So if it's a true democracy and people aren't interested in these things, what is it that we're demanding from these? Our voices aren't loud. And I think that democracy is working then. And I'm very sorry to say it, because I'm very much advocating for all of this. But if people don't care, and that's the majority of people, like you're saying, that you just heard silence from people, it actually is telling me that democracy is working. I thought it would be more controversial at the door, or there would be more people asking questions. So that actually surprises me right now.
Well, it not only that, it was within the mainstream parties as well. I mean, you had, conservative members and NDP members that it just wasn't a topic. It wasn't a topic for any of the people who had some prominence, namely the two, Rachel Notley and Danielle Smith. Like,
yeah, but you're saying Albertans weren't having that discussion.
Well,
so
they
Albertans
weren't, but
informing the parties.
Well, exactly. But and to some extent, there were members of probably each party that were vocal about it. And I do know that there are some policies that were made within the parties to address concerns around the lockdowns and the mandates, etc. But by and large, and you're right, and it is, but I'm just highlighting how disappointed I was in and how it highlighted the problem to me that we have such a disengaged community of Canadians, and the disengagement varies from being so absolutely fed up with what's going on that they've just turned their back on any hope of having any influence and then have given up. And then there's some who just have no idea of whether or not you're voting for an MP or an MLA. And then there's some people who just, couldn't be bothered and have never voted in their entire life. So my eyes were completely opened up. I learned a lot during that time, door knocking and speaking to Albertans. And so that's why I think what you're doing and why getting this information out to as many Albertans as possible, and Canadians and people of the world as possible, to encourage them, through our experience, strength, and hope, that they can make a difference as individuals. That when we come together as Canadians, and we did see it with the trucker convoy, even though the result was not what we wanted, and necessarily, especially the abuse of power and the Emergencies Act, the debanking, the frivolous
maybe it
lawsuits.
was what we needed.
But maybe it was.
Because it exposed so much.
Well, and my husband always says, reality and perfection are synonymous. And so if it's happening, it's perfect, right? Like, there's a reason.
I think I would get along with your husband.
Oh, I think you would too. Yeah. But that is a gift that we cannot overlook, right? That the fact that we are experiencing what we are experiencing right now should be looked at as a gift and an opportunity to launch, right? And so that's what I'm hopeful for. Although I do sometimes often see the glass half empty.
Yeah, and I'm an eternal optimist, and that's why I have such a hard time with that, because I wouldn't be here if I was I'd be like, I'm out of here. This is all done. We don't know what we're doing. We're all can't make any change. I wouldn't stay here. Like, it's just not in my nature. And so it's hard for me to hear that. But let me go back to the Ingram decision, because this is where I think we get accountability. And I agree with you on an inquiry. I think that needs to start at the federal level. And I hope that when we have a new government, actually, no, I'm not even going to say that, because I heard the word disappointed and the word hope, and I don't want to use that. We have a federal election coming up. Federal candidates are going to be asking for people's votes and money. And we have an opportunity to ask them specifically, what are you going to do about a COVID inquiry? Are you in favor or are you not? I think that's an excellent question to be asking federal candidates that are, especially obviously conservative ones in Alberta, because they've been incredibly silent over this time. So I don't disagree with you on a lot of things. It's just, what are we doing about it? But with the Ingram decision, because the judge in that case found that that was illegal, Like I said, Jeff Rath had started a class action on behalf of all Albertans to get compensation for the damage that the government caused, the provincial government caused, for closing their businesses. And I'm so excited about this lawsuit, not because, it's a fun thing, but because we're going to hopefully see some accountability. I don't know how they're going to, it's clear they were liable. It's clear they made a mistake. It's clear it was ultra vires. We already have that decision. And so we're at this stage now to get it certified. And we were a little surprised that the province said that they're going to fight certification. And that's where we're at right now. And all of this is available on rathandcompany.com website. And it's worth going there because we got quite a bit of evidence from the province. So let me talk about that a little bit. The process with
what's it called? Rath and Company?
Yeah, .com.
And okay,
yeah.
.com. I'll put that up for everybody.
Yeah, that's perfect. And so with the class action, you have to go to the court and ask the judge to kind of lump all of the lawsuits together. Because in a class action, instead of every business in Alberta going to the judge saying, hey, I lost $100,000, I lost $300,000, I lost $50,000, the damages will be figured out later, but it's just to say all of the people that are affected are going to be represented in this one class, so the judge doesn't have to do it individually all across the province. So we filed our notice of application, and you'll find that on Rath and Company website. And then we had a little bit of evidence from our two applicants, and that's Rebecca Ingram with the gym in Calgary, and Chris Scott with the cafe, Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. So those are the two representative plaintiffs. And we had their affidavit evidence, which is pretty straightforward. They had a business, they were told to shut down. As a result of the shutdown, they had losses. And then the province said that they're not agreeing that this should be a class action, so they're defending it. And they've presented 5 different affidavits. So a couple weeks ago, we did cross-examination. That's not available yet. But the affidavit has been filed in court, those 5 affidavits, and they're available on the website. And what I would suggest your viewers look at are some of those affidavits, one being from a lady at the Treasury branch, so financial information. And I was very surprised that the province gave us this much evidence to begin with, because usually at this stage, you don't see a lot of evidence. It's just whether or not the judge should certify it as one class action, all the lawsuits together. It's not about whether or not this is, whether or not they're liable and how much money. That is all going to come later. And in the case of this Treasury branch senior, she provided how much the government spent in Alberta over the 3 years for COVID programs and services. And I'm just going to turn to you for a second to take a wild guess. I've asked people this, like in 3 years, how much would you think for, again, it was designated COVID programs and support?
Oh, it'd have to be over billions.
Billions?
Would it?
And isn't it just crazy? Like we talk about this money, like it's monopoly.
Oh, I have no idea. Like I have no frame of reference. Like 33 trillion, whatever, 200, whatever. What it's like to me. They spent a lot of money.
Yeah, it was $13 billion in 3 years for programs and services, and it also shows some of the categories. And that's where I was like, I don't even understand it. It was like site rehabilitation, $400 million. Pothole repair.
What is that?
100 million. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know exactly what that had to do with COVID programs and support, but it just seemed like there was a little bit of wild spending for 3 years on anyone and anything. And then for the businesses, and that's what's sad, is that it also showed us how much they were received when they were told close down. And that's what you see there in the affidavit, is like all these, like, schools needed things and municipalities needed things. So there was a lot of money that went there. But for businesses, it was 650 million for all the businesses in Alberta. And it was just kind of like, that's how much we could dedicate for you, while we just, for public support and services and facilities, they dedicated $13 billion.
I wonder how many billions they spent on stickers and plexiglass.
So there was one category, and it was a huge one. Like, it was usually a very high one, like $1 billion or something like that, or $500 million. But there was also one time that it said 0.6 billion. So that was $600 million. And it just said miscellaneous.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's a big chunk of money.
Wow.
Basically, how much,
Wow.
like, you gave to the businesses. So if it's miscellaneous, maybe you could have miscellaneously given it to the business too. The other thing that I like, it was just hard to, well, actually, that was in the transcript, so I can't actually talk about that yet. But once we file the brief, we're going to attach the transcript so I could talk about that.
Oh, I can't wait to read it, because why would they have given so much information, do you think?
I don't know. It's really, I think, I don't really know. We didn't expect this much information. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We only had 2 weeks from when we received it, and it was about 1,000 pages and 2 expert reports. And we had to cross-examine within 2 weeks. So we didn't think that we'd be getting this massive ton of evidence and expert reports. But in the end, yeah, we did the cross-examination, and I think we got some really interesting information out of it. And that will be coming. So the next step now is the brief will be filed August 9th, unless there might be one little change in the schedule. If not, that's the day. Then the province has to file their response, I think September. And we're actually in court October 1st and 2nd. So we really want to obviously maintain those dates if possible, because it's hard to get dates all the time in court. But then the judge would decide after that whether or not this should be certified as a class action. And that's where we're at on that one.
Wow. Well, good luck with that. I hope that well, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things. I hope that if there are settlement talks, which it wouldn't surprise me that that's the route that it goes ultimately, especially if it gets certified,
Yeah.
that the people are properly compensated. The government does the
Well,
right thing.
yeah. And like I said, given now that they've shown that there's $13 billion that kind of went here, there, and everywhere, and 600 million to, or so, to businesses, is that right?
Well, and
And
how did those decisions get made? Like, who made those decisions to just spend away?
good question. Yeah, that was one of our questions. So you'll see the
Yeah.
answers later. But
Okay.
maybe
Okay.
we'll turn now to the other class action,
Yeah,
because that one
definitely.
is, there's a few things that, because it's still under the transcript, which hasn't been filed, that it's harder for me to talk about. But there's a lot of information already on the website, and I would very much encourage people to look there and peruse through that evidence and information. So the second lawsuit, and it's now a class action, I started an action on behalf of Carrie Sakamoto, who was really severely injured by, she first took the AstraZeneca and then took a Pfizer vaccine within, I think it was 10 days, paralyzed, half her face, was hospitalized, couldn't walk, couldn't eat, couldn't swallow, and really close to death. And
Mhm.
so I filed a lawsuit on her behalf. And when I started working with Jeff, had made a decision to turn it into a class action, and it's a class action on behalf of anybody injured in Alberta with the vaccines. And I think our claim is very unique, and important given what happened. And again, I am hoping this is going to give accountability as well, where people are looking for some answers. So one of our allegations and claims are that there was negligent misrepresentation, excuse me. So as we know all the public health officials federally and provincially were saying everything is fine and dandy with the vaccines. They're safe and effective. So they were, and we know there's adverse impacts and events, which every day we're hearing more and more about. So that's our claim for negligent and misrepresentation. And then one claim that we added, which I think is so interesting and unique, is because we sued the federal government and the provincial government. And we're saying that both parties conspired to commit assault and battery and it goes to the first point of misrepresentation and lies, is that they were telling people it was safe and effective and elevating that conversation while at the same time suppressing and censoring even information about the adverse impacts. And so that was a coordinated effort by public health agencies and elected officials. And as a result, people didn't have the proper informed consent. So what does that mean? It means that they were assaulted. And so that's one of our claims.
I think that's great. I mean, how do you think it's going to, like our politicians have they have a level of immunity, right? Especially for the decisions that they make while they're in office. What are your thoughts on, those sorts of defenses that they'll have available to them, and do you think that they'll work?
Well, so that's why we're not going after the approval process per se. And that's where oftentimes pharmaceutical issues are based on the approval, whether or not public health should have approved it and whether or not they did the proper regulatory component of it. And that is to a small extent in the lawsuit. Of course, we, claimed and alleged as much as we could. But that's not our main focus. And so there's a huge immunity there because they were doing their duty in the public interest. But what we're saying is that they were making representations to the public, saying that it's safe and effective, at the same time dismissing and censoring and suppressing information about its harm. This is like a step further than we've seen before. And it's not, is it in their public duty? Because there's immunity when they're in their public duty, but is it in their public duty to be suppressing information and suppressing information that's available and censoring it? So there's an allegation of a malfeasance, that there was.
Oh, good.
So it's not just that they were performing in their public duty, and that also is very scientific and technical, and what did Pfizer tell them and all that stuff. And we're not going to get into all of that in the end, because it's more about what they were telling the Canadian public, and did the Canadian public have informed consent when they took it? And I don't think anyone can say yes.
I don't think so either. And where is that lawsuit at? What stage is that at?
Yeah, so that one's pretty early. And so I didn't mention clearly, but with Ingram, we've just sued the provincial government because it was provincial government mandate. So it's easier when there's one defendant. In this case, as I did mention, we sued both the federal government and the provincial government. So there's a little bit more of a hurdle there. We do have our first case management meeting with the judge in August. So we're going to set deadlines at that point, and it looks like we're going to have some preliminary issues to deal with on that one. So we'll be dealing with that in August. But it's slower.
So do you think that, as you've probably heard, that Pfizer's being sued by, I think, the state of Kentucky, is it?
5 states.
5 now. How do you think that is going to influence the litigation up in Canada?
Well, I think it's going to help us. And although I want to see justice as quick as possible on this, I think a lot more information is going to continue to come out, especially as different states are suing and things become more and more public, because a lot has been hidden, as I was just saying. And so I think that's going to be very helpful and informative, obviously, to our lawsuit. And I also think, going back to your point about an inquiry and all of this stuff, all of the things that, people that have been harmed in this way or have been advocating for this, I think really believe that these answers are going to come. And while, again, I would like a lot of this to have happened earlier, I don't even think that we were prepared with some of it, in terms of there were still a lot of holes that were open. And I think we're filling those in a bit more every day now.
Right. Is there, are you familiar with what's happening with the appeal with the federal court, this decision to basically deem the government's use of the Emergency Act as being unlawful? Do you have any idea where information about where that lawsuit's at?
No, well, as much as I know is that an appeal was filed by the federal government, and I'm assuming that either the parties defended it or something. But yeah, I was incredibly surprised that they appealed it. I think it was more a political move than a legal move, because it was pretty clear in the decision. And I think it was an act of saving face, because you've noticed I don't even think they made a big announcement about their appeal. So
Okay.
I think they're just, and then, once a new government comes in, which is more likely than not in next year, they might just say, we're not pursuing that appeal, which would make total sense.
Yeah. And so, as a lawyer, you've read lots of decisions, you've seen a lot of decisions through, especially decisions related to COVID and the lockdowns, etc. While Ingram may have been a win of sorts, by and large, we have not seen a lot of victories or the decisions go our way in
Okay,
terms
but
of.
I
But
want to
no,
stop you there, because
yeah.
which ones are you talking about? Because some of them weren't decisions, really, like mootness. But the federal court one was excellent. So when people say the charter
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
work or is garbage, I try to remind them about the federal court one. But like, there was maybe the quarantine one. Was that
Well, certainly, but I'm talking about. I followed a lot of the family law litigation that was happening, and by and large, we had a few cases that were correctly decided, in my opinion, but one of them was overturned at the Court of Appeal in Ontario. And I think the other one, although the trial decision was not in our favor, it ended up being so, but not for the reasons having anything to do with COVID anyway, or those arguments. But what I've seen within the courts is this overuse, abuse of judicial notice, and the fact that the Supreme Court of Canada didn't give leave to Sheila Annette Lewis with respect to her issue with the needing a lung transplant, in the Manitoba decision as well, that came out early on in COVID. The Supreme Court refused to hear that case with respect to religious freedom. So, there have been pockets of cases or a few cases that have made it through, and we'll see what happens. But by and large, I'm curious as to your opinion about the likelihood of the judiciary, and I believe it's progressive in nature, whether or not, whether or not, your cases in particular will how you think that they will go, given the fact that judicial notice seems to have been so prevalent amongst the decisions. And for the people that don't know what judicial notice is, it's a concept in law where you do not have to prove the veracity of a certain issue or thing, because it's so notoriously known to be true that you wouldn't dispute the veracity of it. So like the sky is blue, for instance. So when you have these decisions coming out that haven't gone in favor of Canadians, what do you think
Well, but
is
so
going to happen?
did they like that? I don't know if I agree with the premise. Did they go against Canadians? Family law matters are two individuals fighting, and one parent wants the vaccine and one doesn't. So in that case, it's not in the interest of Canadians and what the parent that was advocating for
Well,
the
it
vaccine.
is because, like I had one reported decision, and I represented a dad who wanted to wait and see, and littered throughout the judgment was disparaging comments about being a conspiracy theorist and anti-vaxxer, etc. And in fact, that decision, even though it wasn't pled, the judge went beyond what the relief sought and actually took the healthcare decision ability away from my client because of this issue, because she had framed my client as this person who was unfit to make reasonable healthcare decisions for his children. So these decisions were not just what's in the best interest of the child. They were politically motivated, and they were used to punish parents. In that same decision, my client there was an order placed against him that he was not allowed to talk about COVID-19 with the children, or talk about the vaccinations at all with the children, or allow a third party to do so. So, it wasn't just two parents disagreeing. It was the judge saying the vaccines are safe and effective. I take judicial notice of it. And by the way, Dad, all of your rights as a parent, insofar as making healthcare decisions are concerned, are being stripped away from you. So that's kind of what has happened.
Yeah, well, and what I was just going to add to it is the judges were obviously relying, and the parent advocating for the vaccine was relying on public health, their
Yes.
proclamations. So
Yes.
you have to understand, when you're a man who is not probably a scientist going up against public health proclamations, you see a judge going like, will I choose the public health whole establishment, or will I go with this feller? And I don't know what kind of evidence you provided, but that's
Yeah.
all I was saying earlier too. I think it was terrible that this is what parents had to do. I think that was
Yeah.
awful. I'm not suggesting that this was the right course. I'm not suggesting, again, I'm not defending the judges, but you're like, I think that it seems like a terrible place to have that issue brought forward. It's unfortunate. And I think this goes back, let's actually take it back to where this started, with all the fear mongering and all of the division that was created by public health and our elected officials, because parents couldn't even have a discussion about this. If somebody was questioning it or just wanting more information or holding off, they were turned into conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And then we have a judge that's like, what? So again, not defending, but let's look at it now, a few years later. I'm not happy that this is how it happened. But like those kind of orders going over and above, and same, like, I wasn't familiar obviously with your case, but things like Tamara Leach and Chris Barber weren't able to speak to each other for 3 years, and she can't talk about anything related to like a convoy or freedom or something like that. Just the conditions imposed on people were like it would be in like an crazy authoritarian government, that we hear disparaging comments about Putin and how of a dictate he is, and then we're telling people what they can and cannot say in Canada, and we think we're any
Yeah.
better. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the problem. Like that kind of over the top reach where they can't even talk with their kids about it. That's wrong. That's compelling speech. That's stopping even a relationship between the parent and the kid. But then this is what did we go through? It was like psychologically very difficult, so much division. And then you have a judge in the middle of it too. That's obviously one way. And that's one thing somebody told me early on too is you have to consider too, like judges usually, as you know, probably are quite removed from the situation. Usually you come with two parents fighting. The judge has nothing to do, nothing to no one, let's just hear this and get over with it. For all the judges, this was actually personal. They likely
Yeah.
took the vaccine. Likely their families were having the same arguments we were having with families and friends, and the division happened to them. So it became personal by nature, by default. They were going through the same thing we were. And that's one thing, too, I appreciate about the judges that maybe we haven't considered enough. Like maybe they lost and now they have to reconcile those things as well for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I really hope that there's I hope that our our judicial institutions, our political institutions realize just how much confidence has eroded, and support for them has diminished because of the response to COVID. And it's not just trite. It's very impactful because when when citizens lose the confidence of their governments and their courts, things can go downward, in a downward spiral quite fast, and they need to take this seriously and not be so dismissive from my perspective.
Mhm.
And you're right, the division has was played a lot into it, and then we also have to remember that everybody is just human at the end of the day. And but that's why it's so important for transparency and education to be at the forefront of this. And but it's up to, we are, in one way, we can't look to our leaders to provide this, to be the sole provider of the solution, but at the same time we are in the situation where we find ourselves, and so we have to meet people where they're at. And 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 I would extend an expectation onto the people in elected positions right now to take what we're saying seriously, and use this as an opportunity to reflect and make decisions um, that are going to build Canada, and put Canadians first, all Canadians, and not just the special interests and lobbyists that seem to throw money at them. I mean, I interviewed Randy Hillier at the very beginning when I started doing these podcasts, and he has been in an elected position, or was in an elected position, for quite some time. And when I asked him about his experience and why things have unfolded the way it has, he was very clear that the elected officials are captured by lobbyists and corporate interests. So when you have somebody that's been in politics for as long as he has and has seen the underbelly of it, and the more I know about politics, I think that we have a major problem right now. And I would implore, and I'm going to be actually interviewing Maxime Bernier, and Michael Batten next week, or on the 17th. I think, as who are with the People's Party of Canada. And so I'm excited to talk to them about how they are going to expose that if they get elected. And what they can do to, because we need to see, I think we need to expose the darkness in order to be able to see the light. And a lot of people, I get criticized often because I I can be like a downer on reality. I mean, you, Eva, what I admire about you is how positive you come across, and I don't always come across that way, I suspect, but it's because I think we cannot shy away from the evil and the darkness that we find ourselves floating in right now. And if we don't have a good grasp of what is actually transpiring around us, then we're hard, going back to our earlier, how we started this conversation today, we're not going to be able to find the solutions unless we figure out what the problems were and expose the problems. So I'm really looking for that in a leader right now, because that is the circumstance where we find ourselves in, where they are the people who hold so much control and power over the narrative, that they have a responsibility to their constituents and to the citizens to shine the light on that so that we can fix it and make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, I don't disagree, and I don't suggest there aren't problems. I just don't focus on the problems. I focus on the solutions. And like, even saying everyone is captured, great. So elect new people. Like,
Yeah.
I never understand that that it's that bad of a problem. Randy Hillier was a one-off. He was, and actually I just had this great conversation with a professor of like political philosophy, and he was saying that there's no honor in a lot of the political figures right now, and that's a problem. If you're not honorable, then who's going to hold you to account? You're not holding yourself to account. And so let's just have some more honest people run. I think there's enough honest people in Canada that could make a mark, make a dent, and then affect change that way. But I don't see it as a problem. I
Well,
just
it is a massive problem.
No,
It's a massive
it is a
problem.
problem, but there's a solution. Sorry, is what I'm saying.
Well,
Like,
there
I'm
is
not captured right now. You're not captured right now. Most of the Canadians aren't captured right now, and nothing's stopping them from running, from taking more of an active role, from being involved. And then even to, like you said, special interests. Well, where are these unvaccinated people creating a special interest group? What's stopping them? There was $10 million that went to the truckers at one point in time, and then it was chickens with their heads cut off. That's a special
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah. No, you're right.
And then the one thing I'll just add to is, and I say this as often as I can too, is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It was mothers that were tired of kids being, their own children dying or being injured from drunk driving, that affected change in the legal system, and they pushed politicians to do something. There's nothing stopping unvaccinated people from doing that, from starting an interest group. But instead we just see, like, again, chickens with their heads cut off. We need a new system. Everything is corrupt. It's a political part, this and that. Be the special interest then. Why LGBTQ is excellent at it. Take a few pages from there.
100%.
Oh,
It's
wow.
just,
Let's see. Let's see
and
what they're
I
doing.
agree with you. I've been speaking with many Albertans, and I'm a big, I think I'm on board with it. I have very strong opinions about what it is that the top three or four things that I think are going to destroy our country and are destroying our country. And I think, rather than focusing on some other things that I think are important, but if we don't as a community start realizing how devastating it's going to be for some of these other big picture policies, like net zero and SOGI. I have a big thing for mass uncontrolled immigration. We need to control and freedom of expression. And I'm trying to myself organize and be part of that solution in that regard. So, but you're right. And I just want to touch on quickly, your comments about, well, anybody can run, and you're right. Anybody can run, and I did run. It's extremely challenging, though, when you have the money and the deception that occurs in political campaigns, and it's not all up and up, and it's dirty business, and there's all, and I'm going to speak from my experience. When I ran, the messaging was so captured about fear of Rachel Notley and etc., that rather than voting for a person who probably was more likely to share your values and your worldview, that messaging was so prevalent and carried the day. And so what ends up happening is people will vote for the lesser of two evils. And it's not cliche. It sounds like a cliche, but when you're voting for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil. And people don't get that because we haven't really experienced evil, whatever that means. But we have I think a lot of people have a Pollyanna view about and project, because they are a good person, that they expect everybody else to be good people as well. And that projection on has been is actually I think it's misplaced, because people are not good, and there is real evil in this world, and there is corruption, and there are forces that are preventing people from being able to exercise their independence and their freedom and their responsibility, and they're being prevented from moving forward because of these corrupt systems. And so it's not it's so multifaceted, and they all kind of have to work in unison together, um, because it's almost next to and I'm sure Maxime will agree with me when I interview him in a couple of weeks. It's almost next to impossible in this climate to fight against the machine of the captured in mainstream media, and also the captured independent media, which or so-called independent media, which was really turned, it really showed their true colors and their allegiances, especially in Alberta, and especially in the last provincial election. And I say that because we had news organizations such as Rebel News and Ezra Levant endorsing as a news organization a candidate, Daniel Smith. And I have a big problem with that if you want to also convey to the public that you are a legitimate, unbiased source of news. So anyway, like, I don't think we're going to solve any of these issues today, but I think what this conversation highlights for me, and I hope it highlights for the people who are watching this, is how complex these issues are. And although we can have a diverse viewpoint in terms of where to focus our attentions, we have to also to see, there's so much work to be done around this, and the conversations have to continue around this in order for us to be able to fix clearly what's not going right in our country.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily agree with most of it. To be honest, I don't think it's that complicated. I think we're making it more complicated. But I think we're going to be going in circles here. I again have said that I don't deny that there's problems, there's hurdles, there's capture. But what are we doing about it is the question. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. And I keep seeing people wanting to reinvent the wheel. And I don't think that's the way to do it. I think that there's a lot of tools that are available. For example, I'm going to constituency association meetings now. There's like 6 people. And here we're saying it's this whole captured organization. There's nobody there. It's sad that people aren't involved in their civic responsibility in that way. And again, they're just looking for some other answer. It has to be this, it has to be that. No, go to a meeting, get involved, do a fundraiser, do a town hall, invite your elected officials. By chance, just with some Twitter people, we had a little get together and 16 MLA showed up. I think there's a massive divide and opportunity. Like when you're saying they and the machine, those are people too. Replace the people is what I keep saying. It's like, don't create a new machine and then change it, amend the machine when you're in there, but get into the machine first so you could maneuver it. But I just feel everyone, like so many people, not just you, but everyone's looking for a different structure and system and solution, and they're not using the ones that are right in front of them. That's what I really feel, and I'm learning.
Well, I agree with you. Yeah, I think you're right, and let's end on this, and because you are solutions oriented primarily, and so please tell us about. You have your own podcast, and you have great guests on your podcast, and maybe tell us about that, and then Empowered Canadians. And then I would love to hear how it is that we can, and the viewers here can support what it is that you're doing to further your objectives.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And so going back to the 2 lawsuits, because it's like, and I agree with you, especially the mainstream media, they have been I think I would blame them the most, to be totally honest, because their job and responsibility is to hold the government to account. And they've done basically the opposite. They've been a microphone, a megaphone for the government, never questioning anything. So that's actually where I would put the biggest blame. But then at the same time, I don't need their megaphone anymore. I think I probably get more views than the CBC does sometimes on something. So with social media now, it's just amazing what we could do. So what I would ask on the lawsuits is that your viewers share that information, share the website, inform people, because the mainstream media has failed people again. They should be telling people that there are huge class actions in Alberta. If you lost your business, if you were closed, they should know that there might be some compensation for them from the government. They're not a peep. Same with if you're vaccine injured in Alberta, they should know that there's a class action, not a peep. And I think that's despicable, because here they're talking about we're Canadian content, this and that. Well, let's talk about Canadian content instead of. That's where I get really upset, is the garbage that they're shoving down our throats. That's where I'll get the most mad. But so they're Empowered Canadians. You could get information. I have 2 courses. One is about our history of Canada, how it came to be, because it's important to know that. The charter, going over some of the landmark cases, the political system, explaining it, legal system, and then civic engagement. And I thought I'd just do a cute little handout book. And then I took on these massive topics and subjects, trying to condense it into a book. And I'm like, what was I thinking? But it should be fairly manageable. It was supposed to be out already, but like I said, it's been a bit more of an endeavor than I thought. It's still going to come out. There's nothing there for people, and I'm hoping this will just help elevate the conversation. And then my podcast is the same thing, just trying to elevate the conversation with information. I'm learning a lot when I'm doing the interviews. It's about the financial sector, economy, political system, history, what Marxism is, where it came from, how it shaped things, and how it's still shaping things. So lots of really interesting things. Just trying to put some good content out, some helpful, informative And then people can, I'm hoping that's the biggest thing, elevate the conversation as well.
Yeah. Well, I think you are, Eva.
Thanks.
What's your, I think you are. What's your Twitter handle? Is it, and that's the best place to see you on the social media
Yeah.
sphere?
So it's Chipiuk, at Chipiuk, actually.
Okay.
My Twitter
Well,
handle.
okay. Well, thank you so much. Again, I love what you do post, because I do follow you, and I do think what you're doing is so very helpful, and I encourage everybody to check out Eva's the lawsuits and Eva's website, and scrolling here at the bottom here, empoweredcanadians.ca, and do what you can. Get off your butt.
Yes.
Get off your butt and help us.
Yeah.
Because we can't do this. We can't do this alone.
Don't try to find a new solution if you haven't exhausted the current solutions first. Like, go to a constituency association meeting, organize something in your local community, talk to your city councilor, even that, go to a council
meeting.
Like,
go to a
just
council
start
meeting.
with something. Yeah. There's
You
opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate you taking time. Please, I hope that you'll come back so we can get an update, especially as your lawsuits continue on. How are they being funded? Or is there a place for fundraising for them?
No, so they're class actions, and Jeff
Okay.
Rath is it's just going through his office. So yeah, it's
Okay.
nice that way.
Okay. All right. Well, please. Oh, sorry. Oh, you got, anyway. Can you hear me? Oh, I think can't hear you. In any event, thank you, Eva, for coming on today, and let's do it again sometime. It was great to have you on the podcast, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine. Take care.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.